Hey everybody, welcome to Local Business Hacks Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Case, and I'm on a mission to help you. Every week, we're going to be talking to local business owners and experts to get their best tips, tricks, and hacks to grow your business. This show is designed to teach you, inspire you, and motivate you to take massive action and start to build your future-proof business. Whether you're just starting off or you're taking your existing business to the next level, this episode is for you. So let's get started. Hey listeners, I'm your host, Carl Case of Local Business Hacks and Director of Business Development for Referrizer, joined today by a super special guest, Dedria Ryan, the VP of Operations for Amazing Lash Studio in Scottsdale, Arizona. Dedria, welcome to Local Business Hacks.
Thank you, Carl. Happy to be here.
So I want our audience to get to know who you are in this journey that brought you to being the VP of Ops for, I would think, the largest lash studio in the world. I don't think you woke up one day and said, that's what I'm going to do. So tell me, how did you get here?
I'd love to. So first and foremost, it might sound cheesy, but I love bringing people's dreams to life, being a part of that journey. And I didn't know I was going to fall into franchising, but in the early 90s, I was doing software consulting like a bunch of people were doing. It was a wild time, a lot of money in the market, very expensive software packages coming out of Silicon Valley. So shipping in ribs from Rendezvous in Memphis to my team in Indiana, implementing software systems. And it was an amazing time. Rendezvous ribs from Memphis is an important note because I am a Southern girl. I was born in Nashville and have spent the last 15 years there. So if you're familiar with barbecue or the South, you know what I'm talking about. But during that time, the travel started wearing down. Got more serious in a relationship and wanted something different. So really looking at other opportunities in Arizona where I was raised. I was doing some writing RFPs for a technology company, and a friend of mine said, have you ever looked at Cold Stone Creamery? And Cold Stone in the 90s was headquartered here and was just popping so many locations, and everybody loved and still loves that product so much. So I had applied for a job in the training department, and they sent me a letter and they were like, thanks, but no, we're going to do something else. And I was like, that is not acceptable to me. So the person I was working with at this technology company happened to be a fraternity brother of the CEO, who is Doug Ducey, who was our governor until last week. So I said, will you send Doug an email, or maybe even a fax by then, because this was like the early 90s at this point. So send Doug a note on my behalf, and then got an interview and started out at Cold Stone in the training department, writing training, facilitating training, slowly worked my way up. And here's how I actually really started to make moves inside of franchising. At Cold Stone, I knew I wanted more, and I wanted to help franchise owners a lot more than I currently was. So I took the franchise survey that we sent out yearly. I looked at all the results and quickly discovered that technology was the biggest issue for owners. Not surprising. Technology can be difficult to understand, and it's sometimes not rolled out great. So I started digging into that a little bit, thinking, how can I help owners understand sales reporting, profit and loss statements, the flow from when you ring up a Mud Pie Mojo and how it flows all the way into the royalties they pay on it. So what I discovered during that journey was our technology was actually being serviced by consultants outside of the business. And so intuitively, I was like, it's crazy to me that we're having consultants actually make decisions for what's happening inside of a location. My heart and soul, like where the power is, and some franchise owners may not agree with this, like the person behind the counter, behind the massage table service suite, that cashier, that front desk person, the service provider, they're the ones that know exactly what their customers need. So I think if you're making a decision outside of really spending time inside of the four walls, you're missing the boat. So wrote a business plan, presented it to the executive team to bring all the technology inside and basically build a technology department, which then turned into a help center internally, which turned into a profit center eventually. So that's how I started. That's how I rose within Cold Stone, being like really maniacally focused on how to help the franchisees and what their pain points were and how to overcome some of those. So that was in the 90s, and they still have that same help center. That team has grown exponentially since then. But during my time with Cold Stone, I also wanted to try other things. So I worked on a profitability team. I did franchise development for non-traditional locations. So what I would say is I would put Cold Stones where people work, play, live, and travel. So ballparks, amusement parks, concert venues, airports, cruise ships, which was a really, really fun job. Sales is a great job for this. But being able to partner with folks like Six Flags or Live Nation, Airmark was a pretty incredible thing. So that was fun. And then decided that I wanted to do something else. So I fell into franchising because of Cold Stone. And it was an amazing place to learn franchising because we started with 72 locations when I was there. By the time I left, we were over 2,500, really predominant internationally. So that was an incredible journey. And I really learned about franchising from a very, very strong team. The devil is in the details in franchising. So you got to read your ops manual. You got to understand the franchise agreement. Yet you also have to understand how to deliver a great service that is different than what your competition is doing, because competition, especially now, is always present. It's not the large chains anymore. It's very accessible ways for small business owners to be able to run their own business. So delivering a great experience, being able to really take care of your teams is really where it's at. As Don Henley says, the wolf is certainly always at your door. So we're always mindful of that. So it kind of fell into food, being a fan of Cold Stone, and then had some friends that had left Cold Stone and went to this little yogurt chain that was a social media darling called Pinkberry. And they had tapped on my shoulder and said, Howard Schultz Fund, Mavron is getting ready to invest some money. I know I had went to Dunkin' Donuts after Cold Stone and spent some time there doing non-traditional sales too, and loved it. Iconic brand, every person's coffee. It's an incredible thing to be a part of an iconic brand. For my personality, I like speed and I like high engagement, and the chaos of things is what really excites me. So during this time, I was able to see that while I really appreciate iconic brands, being in the emerging brand or startup space is probably better suited for my personality and my cadence, how I like to work, the types of owners I like to work with, because I'm a builder. I'm less of a tweaker. So I like to build things more than kind of like tweak on the little details. So when Pinkberry came around and said, we're going to really start building our infrastructure and really start to see some heavy growth, I was like, let's go. And it was also with some dear people that I really respected and enjoyed working with from Cold Stone. So moved to LA and really ran the training department for Pinkberry, primarily focusing on new store openings. And as those couple of years turned out, a lot of it was predominantly international. So super blessed to be able to travel around the world and open Pinkberries everywhere. The first year I probably spent at least 160 nights in hotels, primarily in the Middle East. So that was really something super exciting to be able to be a part of and learn. And man, we would see record numbers coming out of our store in Kuwait. And what was so interesting to me, in the US, the mini of 4 or 5 ounce yogurt really was the size that sold the most in the US. But in the Middle East, because they loved carrying that cup around with a logo that was so recognizable and tied back to the Kardashians and some of the celebrities that were dying to get into the West Hollywood location, we were selling large yogurts like wild. So it was so interesting to see the difference in what the product mix was there. So opened, 35 to 50 locations in Pinkberry each year. And then I ended up meeting my husband at a Pinkberry. He was working for a multi-unit owner in Atlanta, and I was there to audit some of the training. And it was this 6'5" Southern gentleman that called me sweetie. And I was like, is he being disrespectful or is he flirting? I'm not sure, but I'm going to stick around and go with it. So we ended up spending those 10 days together as I was auditing his training while he opened locations in Atlanta. And I called my boss and I'm like, I think I better stay and audit supervisor training too. So I ended up being able to spend 6-7 weeks with him. I went back to LA. He stayed in Atlanta. We were long distance for a year. And then I found my way back to Nashville and fortunately found a frozen dessert brand with like-minded leaders in Nashville. He was in Atlanta, so that made that long-term relationship a lot easier. And that journey took me to Tasty Delight and Planet Smoothie in Nashville, which was ran by Jim Amos and Peter Holt. Peter Holt is now the CEO of The Joint and a fantastic leader, and learned so much from Jim Amos too, who is just a pioneer in franchising and has been in the business for 50, 60 years, a long time, his entire career. So ended up spending 10, 12 years in Nashville. Half of that time was with Planet Smoothie and Tasty Delight. We went through a transaction and sold the brand. I split off into a little bit of a different arena. I was a customer at this local whole food juice concept called I Love Juice Bar in Nashville, where I would go, even though I was the vice president of operations for Planet Smoothie, I would go to Juice Bar, get one of their smoothies and walk up 3 flights of stairs so Peter wouldn't see me drinking the competitor's product. Love the product, love the founders, loved their vibe and what they were trying to do. So really sat down with the founder and pitched them an idea of, I think we should franchise. And what do you think? Like, let's make a go of this. You have 3 locations and let's just kind of see what we can do. So really partnered with the founders of that concept, plus a hospitality company in Nashville, and went from 3 corporate locations to an additional 4. So 7 locations, corporate locations all day, plus 50 franchise locations in about 24 months. It was wild because if you have started anything yourself, it is typically on a shoestring budget and on really the backs of just a handful of people. And this was no different. I took an 80% pay cut. A bunch of people, the founders stopped being paid, and we were just really throwing everything into the effort of being able to blow up this concept large scale. And we did it with 5 or 6 people that were really committed to this vision of bringing whole food, vegetarian based beverages and delicious lunch products to the masses. And we would always get asked, like, are you organic? And we weren't 100% organic. But the reason why was I would rather more people have more vegetables than a select people have organic vegetables. Not a widely popular answer, but I do believe that some vegetables are better than no vegetables. So that time was incredible because we built the franchise development system, what lead generation looks like, new studio openings, construction, site development, real estate, ops, openings, marketing, and then of course the post-opening support around what standards look like and compliance. And then once you build the infrastructure, then your owners are like, now what? Are we going to do quarterly LTOs, limited time offerings? And so started playing in that space too with merchandise and promotional items. And we were able to do it really with most of our vendors were inside of Middle Tennessee, if not in the Southeast. And so that was pretty important to us too. I didn't want to ship strawberries that were sitting in a bunch of sugar from California that had been frozen for a year and have them be used in our products in Middle Tennessee down the road. So loved that process. it surprised me how much I loved it. Just reinforced that I am a builder and not a tinkerer of processes so much. So during that time, I was with them for 5 or 6 years, put a very strong foundation in place with solid performers and great processes. I'm a process gal. I can be I like to play in a creative space a little bit too. It's probably what lends me to being in that startup emerging brand space. So I like guardrails. I'm a rule follower. You can ask my father, but I like a lot of room to wiggle in between and bounce back and forth. But at the end of the day, like, our guiding light is always going to be our mission, vision, and values. And I'm always pushing and driving towards that. I am a franchisee first person. My customers are franchisees. And I believe, and I know this to be true because I've had this experience over the last 30 years in franchising, you can honor your shareholders, your private equity groups, your vendors, while still helping your franchisees drive top line sales and be as profitable as possible. There is a world, and it exists, where everyone can win. It doesn't have to be this crazy scale of, does a PE firm make money, but the owners are struggling, or vice versa. So that is always my charge. Our success begins and ends with franchisees. Period. End of story. I'll go in an octagon cage and fight it out with anyone that wants to talk, wants to say anything different. So wanted to get back to Arizona. I'm a twin. I have a twin brother here that I'm very close with, and a father I'm very close with, my grandmother. So wanted to get back to Arizona because everyone was getting older. I was flying back a lot more for grandma's hip replacement, knee replacement, and just felt bad being so far away. So 3 years ago, moved back to Arizona with an opportunity with Amazing Lash Studio. And here we are. What is so serendipitous is the CEO then of Amazing Lash, real force in franchising herself and a chip off the block of her dad, Jim Amos, is Heather Elrod. And so she actually shared office space with us in Nashville. So we were able to spend that time together. Every holiday I would come out and visit. We would have coffee and catch up. I adore her and appreciate what she's done, especially as a female, in her ability to raise capital, but also bring deals together and run a tight franchising operation. And one Christmas, like what it used to be a 30-minute coffee every December turned into a 2-hour lunch. And I'm like, something's going on here. So that is when WellBiz had bought Amazing Lash. And WellBiz is a health and wellness portfolio company outside of Denver that owns several brands, over 900 locations, with brands like Amazing Lash Studio, Dry Bar, Elements Massage, Radiant Waxing, and Fitness Together. So all of a sudden that conversation took a turn. That was in December. and February, I was in Arizona. So relocated our family. Timing was great. We have 2 kids that had gone to college. So the timing just worked out. And basically she said, come to Amazing Lash and let's figure out how you can kind of sprinkle that magic, this heart-based leadership, and establish great processes, but also make people feel really loved on. Loving on people is a big deal for me. I believe that I move the needle and create influence with like deeply connected relationships. It doesn't mean that people have 24/7 access to me, but I take the investment and the responsibility that a franchisee gives us really seriously. It's not only just their money, but it's also something that they've probably thought about for many, many years, or something that they're leaving a legacy for to their children. And that's an honor. So I take that really seriously. So the transition was kind of odd. I'd always been in food, primarily dessert, and now in beauty. And it was always funny because my dad would call when I had my big brick Motorola phone in the 90s. And I'm like, Dad, I can't talk right now. I got to go. And he's like, are you having a rainbow sprinkle emergency? And I'm like, you have no idea. We run out of rainbow sprinkles, like stuff goes sideways. And the same thing happens now, where he was like, oh, did you run out of lash adhesive? And I'm like, that's not funny. You need to shut your mouth. Don't even put that into the universe. So what started out as me wanting to be in the FBI, I have a criminal justice and a sociology degree, ended up turning into this franchising experience because of going to Cold Stone and cutting my teeth there and really liking what the ability of helping people open their own businesses and bring some joy and a different part of their life to life. I love being part of that journey. So the transition from food to beauty wasn't super difficult because I'm a beauty junkie. I love products. I was actually an Amazing Lash customer 3 years before I even came over to the brand. So that transition was pretty easy. What was different was selling a service versus a product. I'd always been a pretty product-based person, had never really sold a service per se. And then you layer in, we're a membership model that adds something to it. And then we have from 20 to 30 service providers inside of a studio that are primarily female. So I have loved the journey from food into beauty. And I call out that our service providers are primarily female because what I didn't see coming and what was like the best sucker punch of all time was the ability to really help all these women create careers for themselves that normally may not know what to do. We have over 2,000 lash stylists throughout the US that either have a cosmetology or esthetician license. So they come out of those schools with little to no debt. That's a big deal right now with the cost of college. So being able to come out of school, really build your books and make six figures within a year or two is a really life-changing thing. So being able to empower women to go on that journey with us, grow with us, and then really establish an amazing life for themselves and their family. It gives me goosebumps. I did not see that coming. I'm pretty good at peeking around the corners, and that one really surprised me. And it's the thing that drives me, keeps me going, gets me stoked every day. And if I'm feeling a little lost or needing some motivation, promise, hand to God, I spend time inside of one of our studios because our teams is what brings it all back into focus. And you're like, okay, this is why we have the mission, vision, and values. This is what we're doing for consumers. On the outside, it looks like put some lashes on women. They'll look and feel beautiful. It's actually part of our mission statement. But what I didn't know is when women feel beautiful, they also have a different sense of confidence. And you better believe a confident woman can do just about anything she sets her mind to. So that part was really, really surprising to me. And just like the blessing, silver lining, cherry on top that we're able to do that for so many of our customers. We have hundreds of thousands of members and we're employing thousands of women all throughout the US. And that's a really important job that we take really seriously. So that would be a really long elevator pitch if we had a lot of floors to go up and down, Carl.
Well, Dedria, congratulations to you from going to food to empowering women. Obviously, you're happy because you're driving results to people across the board. So that's amazing to hear. I have a million questions, but for the sake of time, I'm going to ask a couple if that's okay.
Yeah.
Obviously, being in franchising and opening unique markets is something that I think many brands dream of. At Referrizer, we work with brands of all shapes and sizes, typically franchisors that are trying to get into the franchisee space from 5 to 10 corporate locations up to the F45s and Elements massages of the world that are the pioneers in their space. So I think that my question is more or less directed upon what are some things that you've learned that taught you a lesson? What are the things that got you to open those new markets that are hacks that got you to do so from opening 30 locations in Kuwait, which is a market that is forever growing immensely, to just that journey? What are some things that you learned along that way? Yeah,
it's a great question. I think first and foremost, when you're inside of a brand that has multiple locations, your guest, your consumer, they want it to be the same way each time. So whether we're swirling yogurt in Kuwait, Moscow, Lima, or WeHo in LA, it is all the same. Like we actually had a methodology for how you swirled the yogurt and how you got the peak, which we called a pouty peak. So I think being able to have those standards in place that are repeatable and scalable is really important. Same is true for Amazing Lash. The products we use, the techniques we use, the patents we have, those are the same in every single location. And we take the safety of the brand, the way we protect the brand really seriously too. Sometimes it can be the unfun part of franchising is brand enforcement, otherwise known as compliance, but it is about protecting the brand. So I think a repeatable process that your consumers have known to come and love is really an important part of it. You can't underestimate a great location and then owners that are really invested in growing something special inside of their market. We are going into Augusta, Georgia. We haven't been there before. And our owner there, Nadine Pulling, is just killing it with a ton of local store marketing, engaging with her chamber, fellow business owners. There's enough room for everybody. We can all have a seat at the table. So she shows us that by partnering with other beauty brands and concepts and really doing a lot of grassroots marketing to establish herself as, she calls herself Dr. Lash, and she is establishing herself as that. When you go into a new market, you can't lose sight of the fact that you're introducing this brand to people that is brand new. So you have to have great products, a killer experience, but you also have to be really cognizant of giving back to that community. You need to become a fiber of the community. It will help you retain your employees. It'll help you retain your guests. And it's also a really fun way to do the right thing.
Grassroots, baby, all day. I think that something else that maybe I want to shed light on that for those of you listening didn't pick up on, Dedria, that FTD in your operations manual is the backbone to your business. And when we're franchisors onboarding franchisees, there's many reasons that they're a franchisee of your brand, but ultimately it's because they don't know how to do what you do. So something that you touched on earlier, which is when you were at one of your first companies, was seeing how outside consultants were attempting to shape the operations inside of the brand from a tech stack perspective. Your operations and FTD need to be created by your best operators and your best managers, because they're the ones that are experiencing things that no one that's not breathing and living inside of your four walls will ever experience. So with that being said, is there advice that you have or lessons that you learned in looking at creating or implementing your operations when, these brands are working with people that are clueless? I have a brand that I work with, and they target gas station operators to onboard at their boutique fitness brand. And that is a total different world that people don't understand in any way, shape, or form. So I guess my second follow-up question to you is, what advice do you have, or what tips and tricks as far as implementing the strategies and the operations that the brand mandates?
Yeah. I mean, first, you're absolutely right. When you get into franchising, you are buying a proven concept, you're buying trademarks, support, and training material is like the essence of franchising. The tricky part is you're also an entrepreneur. So you want to be able to have some say and to be able to have some wiggle room. It's probably why I love it, because I like that wiggle room too. So it's always this fine line with franchisees. Like, it's probably, well, my dad would say how he raised a sassy female too, is harnessing, like, you don't want to harness their spirit too hard, because that's also the thing that's going to make it amazing. But you do have to keep some parameters and standards and boundaries in place. And so that's why you rely on an ops manual to be able to have those repeatable processes and then hold a standard to that. For us at Amazing Lash, beauty moves very quick from a product perspective and innovation, and we're very focused on that. It's one of our drivers of growth. So I update the ops manual quarterly, because we move quick and we change a lot of things up, and I wanted to stay current. First and foremost, if you're thinking about coming into a franchise, we honor the fact that you want to be an entrepreneur. And that's an amazing journey to be on, but do not recreate the wheel. The wheel is there for a reason. Take advantage of it. That's not to say that we don't want great ideas coming back to us, because of course we do. Like, again, going back to the smartest person inside of a location is probably a cashier or service provider, but we want those ideas. My job is to take those ideas and are they scalable for hundreds and hundreds of locations? Do we have vendors that can produce that in a real profitable, scalable, quick way? It's not surprising. Supply chain is something that every brand has been struggling with. Is it a product or service that your service providers can implement? The workforce right now is difficult. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration. What I see the most is younger franchise owners want to come in and start, I can do inventory this way. Or what if I just flipped it that way? You will spend a lot more money, a lot of extra time, and you'll have a lot more agita trying to do that than just go with what the plan is. But also like partner with your franchisor to enhance and make it better, but use use the tools that you actually paid for, because that's why you're here.
Yeah, that's amazing advice. Thank you. And something that I want to touch on for those of you listening, vendors shouldn't just be looked at as somebody that you buy something from. Typically, these vendors are working with lots of other businesses in a nearby radius of you, and it can be an amazing connection tool from a grassroots marketing perspective to maximize that relationship within that vendor. So definitely take advantage of that. Dedria, I have time for one other story. If you want to share something in regards to franchising that you have implemented or that has shaped you into who you are today, the floor is yours.
Oh my gosh, pressure is on. So I will say before we got started, Carl, you and I were talking about the power of relationships and people, how to really create influence with people. And yes, is it a retention tool? Of course, but it's also a way to like really enjoy the work that you're doing. So in that spirit, I would say franchising is a relationship business, period, end of story. It is many other things too, but that's where it really starts and ends. So I've been fortunate to be able to spend a lot of time in the field because that's where I think the magic happens. If someone tries to keep me at a desk, I'll go back into the cage and talk about it. But for me, like I've had the experience to be able to work with a lot of our service providers and managers directly over the last couple of years at Lash. So I've had exposure to training 300 managers over the course of 6 or 7 months and hearing their stories, connecting with them, being a small part of their journey with Amazing Lash has been incredible. I get stories every day, and I still stay in touch with some of these gals where they were truly living in a car with a newborn in a battered shelter. They started working the front desk. Our front desk, they're Lash consultants. They are there to move, book appointments. Their primary job is to be a sales boss. We're here to sell memberships. We want reoccurring revenue. But they start out there and they work their way up. And then I'll get emails 3 years later with a picture at Disney World with now a 3-year-old, and they're still at Lash, but they've created a life for themselves inside of this company that has been truly life-changing for them. I did not know that was going to happen. And I don't know if it's because of the business, if it's because I'm around females, if it's just this perfect storm of where I'm in my career, the foundation that Amazing Lash set with Heather. Happy to be a part of it, but it sounds crazy to say, and it goes back to this rainbow sprinkle conversation that my dad would say, but we're changing lives. I feel it. I see it. I can retell the stories every day. I have stories from our employees where they were like, my life has changed because of this. I have opportunity. I have confidence. I don't have to have the same lifestyle I had before. And it's amazing. That truly is what it's all about.
I love that.
And I have to stop before I start crying because I might get choked up. I love it so much.
Like I told you earlier, I'm blessed to be able to travel worldwide to visit with our clients in now 75 countries and staff in 12 of them, and getting hands-on with customers and employees and seeing how your brand has empowered them to do more I got goosebumps all over just saying it. So I feel
who else is Mr. Worldwide? Pitbull.
Yeah.
So.
I just saw him at Tony Robbins 2 weeks ago at Unleash the Power Within performing.
Humble brag. Cool. Tony, Carl, you're looking for a sponsor.
He got to talk about how he has a worldwide impact now and being a nobody once upon a time. And it's awesome. So Dedria, congrats to you. Congrats to WellBiz Brands for having you on their team and continuing to scale. And I look forward to checking in with you shortly and seeing how this journey is continuing to help you empower other people. So congrats and thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Pleasure's mine.
Thank you so much. That's it for this week's episode. I hope you found it helpful. Be sure to head over to our site, local-business-hacks.com, to check out the show notes and send me questions or ideas for future episodes. If you want to grow your business just like the people you've heard from here, follow Local Business Hacks Podcast and tune in for new tips, tricks, and tactics. Until next time, thanks for listening and keep hacking.